around us is made out of words and images, and they go together. They function together so much that we don't understand how they come apart sometimes. It seems like the natural way to do things because we're so used to writing. We love this idea of words being attached to things and being part of a physical space that causes us sometimes to carve our names into trees, as Mr. Wu has done here in Letchworth State Forest. What we're most familiar with when we think about how words and images go together, probably, when we think about it in print and printed words, are comic books and comic strips. We have an image, we have the text that's telling us the story that's going along, we have the word balloons, and here's Charles Burns's story about teenage life in the 1970s when everybody's turning into freaks. Sometimes we think we know some visual experience that we're looking at. And so if you glance at this for a second, you'd think you were looking at a tombstone, but you know that there's something wrong here. And what this is instead is a poem by Elizabeth Bishop carved into the seat of a bench on Vassar College. The thing that interests me is that individual words are filled with water, individual letters. And so it brings up something as if there's some special code here that we're supposed to figure out. There is no code. Even the simplest change that we make to the way we present words sort of surprises us. And so when the sometime children's book writer, it's a secret, writes his message on the back of a delivery truck, it makes us stop for a little bit. We know that there's a different meaning there than just those words individually on the page. If you look at logos, logos are where you take words and images and letters and you boil them down to an unbelievably powerful essence. At least that's your hope. And here, using enormous numbers of puns, different colors, an understanding of shape and how text and type works, we have the logo for a sandwich shop. Notice that this F is a T. There you go. This is, I contend, the first word any American child learns to read. That a simple M curved on the upside, yellow, standing against a skyline, means something to people so that they can read the concept McDonald's and understand it before they can even recognize any other letter sometimes. That's how powerful these things can be. So we're going to talk about the Eiffel Towers, whatever that is. Robert Indiana was an artist, famous mostly for this, which appears in many different forms. This is a sculptural form. We might imagine that this is merely the word love, but it's not merely the word love. It's merely the word love in a specific incarnation. It's physical. It takes up space. You can sit against it. You can take your picture against it. It is the interplay between blue and red. It's a specific typeface that's being used. It's the fact that the O slants off to the side. And though Robert Indiana, whose artwork is filled with word and image combined, doesn't think of it, those of us who are interested in the subject consider this visual poetry. That's where you take word or text, you put it in some important visual form in order to make the work, in order to bring out the aesthetic experience. This is Michal And and Maria Damon working together to write a story about the snow in upper Wisconsin. And so they're using an enormous number of puns, multiple languages, little typographical games like these wings that are flying are tildes. They're working with text, but they're making a visual text space for us to live in, for us to understand. These can get more complicated. Here, another female-male team working together give us an unbelievably complex little book that this is one page on. Based on the Fibonacci sequence, amazingly enough, and always having a little mathematical formula at the top, this combines an actually fairly straightforward, though weird, poetic text in a very dynamic and deep visual substrate on top of that. And then beneath it, always another, a little footnote. All of this is a very complicated little story that you can read through if you take the time. It takes longer to read than reading a page of regular text. Johanna Drucker's last name means printer. Printers are people who work with type, and she works always with cold, hard type. And what she has here is a page of a book of hers. And that H there is in 4 or 5 different words, so it actually has a place where it stands inside of 4 or 5 different sentences, because across these pages and throughout the book, different sentences are weaving in and out of each other. And if you'll notice, there's text, little text underneath, all sorts of layers of text in this. Peter Ciccarello, who's just a master, works in what I call geographic poetry. Most of his poetry is words placed upon forms like mountains, crevices, but always so that the text that you can read, you can see along it something disappears into the crevice, disappears into the fold, disappears against the horizon, disappears in the crumbles that you see on the page. So you can't always read it. You can't read it as a straight piece of text. You have to sit with it. You have to think it through. You have to figure out what's missing. Christopher Fritten has put together, using the ancient form of art and caustics, to put together a single word poem. And this is the only place he would contend where the word chart, the word of this poem, means exactly what it means here. It is both an illustration of itself, a definition of itself, and something beyond that. It's hard to see, maybe. But Bob Grumman has taken this poem and he's made it out of what do we call I forgot entirely, a long division problem. So here's the long division sign here. This is yesterday. Distant sail goes into yesterday, getting us music up here with a K, and leaving a remainder, dreams of marauders. What this means would take too long to think about, but we have the scallops of the waves inside these blues and greens here. This is about being on a bay. This is a man from southern Florida. So, and he's telling a little story here. And notice there's other text everywhere that you have to find and figure out and understand to make it make sense. John Evans picks up trash on the street. Now, has anybody picked up John Evans's story? Now, you've picked it out, Jim, so why did you pick that one?
Well, because I have fond memories of your Christmas cards, John. You know,
and beyond that?
For Penny and I would spend a nice wintry day at night thinking, what is this mean?
So what does that mean to you? Why did you pick it out?
Oh, I thought, well, you know why? Because I could understand the words, John. At least they, were full words.
So that's it. That's the whole thing. You can understand the words, and that gets to the whole problem. Visual poetry, contemporary visual poetry, that's all that this is.
Sorry.
It's designed to essentially scare you out of your normal reading experience into something else. So you can at least read the words. But have you noticed anything about the words, Jim?
Let's see, what have I noticed about the words? Well, they're at the West Coast, does have some
Palm trees?
letters, yeah, they are T's at the end. One step up, I guess the dots might mean something about steps.
And so if you read this straight through, though, would it make sense to you? Would it make easy sense to you?
No.
No. Because it's hard. It's hard. This guy has literally found these things on the streets of Manhattan, glued them together, painted things in back, always with duck heads.
Okay.
That's what he's done every day of his life for many, many years. So here's Michael Peters, who's from Albany, by the way. So Michael Peters, he paints and everything. So he's more of a visual artist than most visual poets. So it's very pretty. And he has thousands of words, thousands of words. If you read it too carefully, it gets hard, because lots of these words are meaningless. He's just made them up to fill in the space, but some aren't. So to really experience this, you don't just experience visually, but you sit down, you dig through the text, and you figure it out. Life is hard. Visual poetry is harder. So Kathy Ernst. Somebody had Kathy Ernst out. Did you put Kathy Ernst away, Lorraine?
No.
So what do you make of that?
Well, now that I see the poem is about frogs, the actual shape of the paper looks like a frog from behind.
It does kind of look like a frog,
Mhm.
and that's one of the things. Now, anything else frog-like about it?
The
Green.
coloring, and she has the word frogs typed into on the paper, all through the typeset. It all says frog. That's all it's typed in.
That's right, that's all it says. How can this be a poem? You've taken a piece of paper, you've typed frogs on it, you've colored it, you've crumpled it up, and you've taken a picture of it. I have no idea what she means here. I keep thinking she's making a reference to Aristophanes, and the frogs, but I'm telling you, that's a long shot, and it's hard to figure out. But there's it. It's at least a quizzical, artistic, hole for you to try to figure out. Ted Warnell works merely by taking text, using code against it to make it make essentially abstract shapes that he is not exactly sure what they'll do. In this case, though, it appears that we have pictures, but every single thing here is text. Everything here is a period or a plus sign or an apostrophe or something. And the major text is down here. An X, which could stand for what?
Cross.
A cross. Xerox.
Yeah, no.
The unknown, certainly, or in this context, I hate to tell Suzanne this, extensible.
Oh.
But one of those possible things. And Ted would think of that, and ink. And then we have two parentheses here. What do they resemble? An O or a zero, and nothing.
Or an inkwell.
Or an inkwell, yeah. He's here talking, he's here working in a totally digital world, but he's reminding us of the paper and ink past of us. You can't see this without the lights on. And let's turn them all off. Ariel Malka, there's too much. Ariel Malka works with text, usually Hebrew scriptures. And this poem is actually, this is actually just a shot of this poem. What it actually is an unreleased poem that physically moves. So the funnel moves the text in a counterclockwise motion into the earth, where then it all spins out continuously.
Why
This-
counterclockwise, since Hebrew is read right to left? It should be clockwise.
So, but that's his thing. Ariel might know, he's an Israeli. This is going to be on exhibit and in the permanent collection of the Shrine of the Book, which is where the Dead Sea Scrolls are, the Aleppo Codex, stuff like that.
It's all just repetitive words, it's not a...
This is not repetitive.
Yes, it is.
Many of the
Yeah, yeah.
But he usually takes huge strings of scriptures, so you could run through the whole thing. So what it is, because I forgot to write down what this is doing, this is one particular part of it. And this is one particular part of a huge four-movement piece. So there's a lot more going on there. If you see this, the first time I saw this, I thought it was a picture. They're just drawings. But if you look closely, there are letters associated with it. There's an I, there's an N backwards, an O, a T, an A, suggested by this delta. And these waves here tell us that this T must be official for some reason. But we won't try to figure out why, because we don't have time for that. And at the very far end, you have things like this. Jukka-Pekka Kurvinen is one of the many Finnish visual poets working in English. And this is 0-1. 0 and 1 put together as one word and then twisted so that it's beyond comprehension. You can't actually recognize the text that used to be there. You can even get farther than this. Tim Gaze works entirely in asemic writing. Asemic writing means you don't have any meaning within the text. The text is there visually for you to look at. This might appear to be a Chinese calligraphic character, brush painted, but it's not. And what's Topol doing here? Quickly, we have 5. Put a hand up like this, especially like this. In Islamic culture, this is the Hand of Fatima. And the Hand of Fatima tells us about the 5 pillars of Islam. So we think we must be talking about the 5 pillars of Islam, especially since there's Arabic text spinning off out of here. Here we have made-up sign language symbols and other little bits of sort of English text mushed together. And it's essentially about, there's no words we're supposed to read. It's essentially about the difficulty of understanding across different systems of meaning, especially textual meaning. Martha Dermassage from Argentina, she takes text that's just totally made up, but she puts it in certain worlds so that we know what it is. So that when we see this, what do we think it is?
It's a
A
newspaper.
newspaper. We know that right away just from the looks. And theoretically, we shouldn't have that. Now, tell us about this, Mary Beth.
It seemed to be very easy to read when I first looked at it, and then when I continued to look at it, it didn't seem to be.
It's not easy to read at all, but it looks like it is because every single letter is clear. And really, all this is essentially a picture drawn with words, with letters. It doesn't really essentially tell us anything. It doesn't have any text. This is Robert Grenier, who's known for, and whose name is pronounced 1,000 different ways, and I don't know what's right, and who wrote many, many minimalist poets. And this poet is just leap round, up, down, or leap down, up, round. I can't remember. Written in this big scrawl, and we're supposed to work our way through this tangle to make sense of it. This one we're not going to look at. This is Michelle Glazer working with somebody else. But this poem, you click on the bird, everything loads, then you go through each stanza, clicking, clicking, and a new stanza comes back. I don't particularly like it because the visuals that were created by a different man, a different person, don't seem to work with the text itself. Not sure if we can get this to go. But anyhow, this right here is because I haven't tested the internet, this right here is a hypertext poem. All it's using is HTML. And the HTML is the marquee code, which tells it to send the code back and forth. And if we sit by long enough, we'll see where it repeats and we can understand this. This one is a 3-person poem. And what you do is you learn through this poem how to read it, and theoretically. And so what we need to do is understand that since these poems are made sort of with the idea that they're films, they often have film-like things in them, such as, unfortunately, it's not working, such as openings. When you see this at first, you don't know what to do, but if you move your
Oh.
and you notice that a text is growing underneath that at the same time. But we don't have enough time to look at this whole thing. So we're going to look as our last thing at Jim Andrews and his work with Neo. Jim Andrews is a Canadian out of Vancouver who's often been, looks like it's not going to run, who's often been, unfortunately can't run this one, so we're going to explain it. Neo's impossible to explain, unfortunately. This is the only reason we wanted the internet. What Neo does is you have a circle, and around the circles are pairs of letters that sort of give you some sort of meaning. And what you do is you hit on the letter. And when you hit on one letter, somebody starts to sing. Starts to sing a certain phrase over and over again. It's a meaningless set of words and tones. And then you hit somebody else, and there's somebody with a deeper voice or a higher voice singing something else. And as you do it, every time you hit a new thing, new words spin out, and they spin in the middle between those two circles. And the sound that you'd be able to hear, if this were actually working, would be wonderful. But some days we're not lucky enough for greatness.
I like that sound, Joe.
It sounds bad. But anyhow, there you go.